Free agency is quickly approaching in the NFL. For the Baltimore Ravens, people are wondering if a possible wide receiver reunion is on the way.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens WR, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now the #1 sports podcast network. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. Thanks so much to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, if you're somewhere in the middle. Thank you as well. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage and content. And on today's show, we're going to be talking a lot about a couple of different situations. In the first part of the show, people are wondering if a possible wide receiver reunion could be on the way for the Baltimore Ravens. In the second part of the show, Isaiah likely sparks some panic on his Baltimore Ravens future. We'll dive into the tight end situation in Baltimore. And then finally, we'll get into a Ravens checklist with former Ravens receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail. Q and I recorded last week. And right after we recorded, the news of Anthony Levine Sr. being hired as a special teams coordinator broke. And so I had to actually chop off that last segment we did about a Ravens checklist, but it was a good segment. I wanted to play it. Didn't have any bonus episodes over the weekend to play it on, so we're just going to play it here. I think it's a really awesome segment, so we'll talk about a Ravens checklist in the final part of the show. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Player a game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's dive into this here. There are a lot of conversation points about the Ravens and free agency, right? Obviously, the trenches are the big one. It's where people are looking, obviously, for the right reasons, offensive line and defensive line. I've actually put a post out late last night about the average annual value projected over on SpellTrack for Daniel Falele, and people were very shocked to hear the number that he's projected at. But people are wondering, is there a wide receiver reunion that could be on the way for the Baltimore Ravens? And that is with Marquise Brown. Now, Marquise Brown went on a couple of shows in the Baltimore area and talked about, the Ravens, and he didn't want to leave Baltimore, defended Lamar Jackson. We know that Hollywood and Lamar have a previous relationship, and Hollywood actually posted on his Instagram story something for Valentine's Day. By the way, happy belated Valentine's Day out there. But he posted something for Valentine's Day and had a Purple Heart at the end. Lamar here, this circulated on social media over the weekend. Lamar apparently commented on this story and said Purple Heart means Hollywood to the Ravens. And everybody's like, oh, hold on. Well, Lamar's calling for it. Lamar this, Lamar that, and everything. So that was the image that circulated over social media this weekend. Everybody was like, what's going on here? But I think that, Lamar, like Steve Bisciotti said with the coaching situation, he'll have influence in terms of, what his opinions are. But Eric DaCosta and the decision makers are going to have the final say. Now, I don't want to sit here and, speculate on a picture that circulated on social media over the weekend for 10 minutes or 12 minutes or however long this segment's going to be. I want to talk about, does it make sense for the Ravens to actually bring back Hollywood? Now, obviously, again, I mentioned the relationship that those two have together. But in terms of him, his time in Baltimore, he was a solid player for the Ravens. I'm not going to come on here and say that Hollywood was bad for the Ravens. Now, there were some things where he'd fall down right before first contact or right after first contact, but he put up 1,000 yards in his final season in Baltimore, went 584 in his rookie season to 769 to 1,008, had a total of 21 touchdowns with the Ravens in 3 years. So he was a solid guy. At points, I called him the best number 2 wide receiver in the league. Obviously, Baltimore is using him as their number 1. But then the whole trade situation happened which again, Hollywood got into a lot of detail about how, there was just some things that, with the offense and whatnot, he felt like if they weren't going to do things a certain way, he wanted a fresh start. And he said that on a couple of Baltimore area shows. But, then he went to Arizona and never really found the same success. He has never surpassed 710 yards in his last 4 seasons, was injured in his first year in Kansas City in 2024. In his 2 years in Arizona, put up about half the total yards he had in Baltimore and a third of the touchdowns in just 2 years. And then in Kansas City, it got even worse. So Hollywood's going to be a guy that if you bring him in, if you're Baltimore, he's not going to cost you a lot of money, right? His contract with the Chiefs, he signed a couple of 1-year deals. Both of those were 1-year, $7 million deals. And, that to me is fine for Hollywood. But if we're being honest, he's probably not going to cost that much this time around. And for Baltimore's situation right now at wide receivers, or currently stands today, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to bring Hollywood in. Why? Because I just don't think he's the type of receiver Baltimore needs. He's 5'9", he's 180 again. He's a speedster. He's more than just a deep threat. But I don't feel like that's what Baltimore needs right now. I feel like they have a deep guy in Tez Walker who's bigger than Hollywood. You have Zay, who's kind of your short area. Well, he's a 3-level receiver, obviously, but he's your guy that, like, in short bursts, he has that electricity to him. Bateman also, I know he had a tough year last year. He's a 3-level guy. Now, the only way that it would make sense to me if the Ravens brought back Hollywood was if they made a trade for a big-time guy. A.J. Brown, maybe a deal for George Pickens if the Ravens can get George Pickens under contract or whatnot. Those are a lot of different things. If you can get a top-end guy like that, then I think Hollywood makes sense because you get a bigger receiver in the building. You get a star guy. You have Zay. And then I think Marquise Brown becomes a complement to Tez. And I think if you have your complement receivers as Hollywood and Tez, I'm totally cool with that. Now, in the situation where an A.J. Brown comes to Baltimore, I'm pretty sure Rashod Bateman is out. But even still, I'm totally cool with Marquise Brown coming back if the Ravens make a big move for a wide receiver. But right now, with this roster of wideouts, with Hollywood in that offense with those guys, I just, it makes sense in terms of what Declan Doyle runs because we're going to see a lot more wide receiver sets. But in my opinion, DeAndre Hopkins makes a lot more sense to bring back and just use him more than what Hollywood would give you at this point. And in terms of the guys that are available on the market that could make sense, I mean, if Mike Evans decides to leave Tampa and doesn't retire, that's a guy that now he's going to cost more money. Again, I think Hollywood, you can probably get him for maybe the D-Hop deal, maybe a $5-6 million contract over one season. But, I just feel like a bigger bodied player would make more sense. Now, again, I'm sure Lamar will be in Eric DeCosta's ear talking about it a little bit, but I just feel like with everything the Ravens already have on their roster, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me to bring Hollywood back. Now, it's not going to shock me if they do. And I don't think it's a bad move necessarily if they do. I just think that there are other needs at that position that they would have. But if he's cheap, if he's not going to cost a ton of money, if, they have a specific plan, I just don't want Hollywood to take snaps away from Tez, right? Because I think Hollywood is still a productive player when he gets opportunities. We saw that with the Chiefs last season when, they were down Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy was missing time. And there are all these guys and Hollywood stepped up and actually did some good things for him. I don't think Hollywood is washed by any stretch of the imagination, but the way that it stands, I feel like that money is best spent elsewhere, even just at that position. Just bring D-Hop back at that point. If you're looking for your bigger bodied veteran type of guy, D-Hop showed a lot of flashes last season. Again, you're not going to use him a ton, but I think you use him more than what you did last season. So my solution to this whole thing is, again, there are two very clear paths for me. If the Ravens run it back at the wide receiver group, maybe add a first rounder in there, and there are other questions about other guys too, like Mekhi Lemon, he's very talented, but what do the Ravens need at wide receiver if they go with a guy at 14 there? Is Carnell Tate an option? There are others as well that you could be looking at. And I know that's a whole different conversation we'll get to a little later. We're going to start our draft content coming up. Really, we're going to hit that next week. But, we'll obviously dive a little bit more into it this week as well. I think that, Lamar would be thrilled if Hollywood were to come back, right? I think he would be. And I'd be cool with it again, but you just need to reshape that room if you're going to do something like that. And that, to me, is the bottom line. So, interesting conversation about Hollywood because, again, I still think he's a talented player. He can help a team. He can help the Ravens. But, if you run into 2026 and your group is Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman, Hollywood, and Tez, I don't want Hollywood to take away the snaps from Tez that I really think he should have. And I think that, again, D-Hop and Tez can coexist together, play different roles for the offense. I think Hollywood and Tez would have a little more overlap in terms of their skill set. So it's an interesting conversation. So we'll see what ends up happening with it. We'll come up in the second part of the show. Isaiah Likely, he sparked some panic on his Baltimore Ravens future, but if we're being honest, Baltimore Ravens future already seems to be pretty sealed at this point. Not certain, but pretty certain. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Zocdoc. Finding a doctor you actually like and feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. Sure, you want someone who's a network nearby and has availability, but you also want a doctor who listens, makes you feel comfortable, and explains things clearly. That kind of doctor exists, and finding them is easy with Zocdoc. Zocdoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love without all the hassle. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states, covering over 200 specialties from primary care and dentistry to dermatology and eye care. Zocdoc makes the process simple. You can search by specialty or symptom and actually build a care team that works for you. You can see real-time availability and book instantly. No phone calls, no waiting on hold. Stop putting off those doctor appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message. And the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can your pick cash, but it could also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. Thanks so much again for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We have 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens coverage here for you. The regular show is Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern time, but we also have a lot more. We have bonus episodes over the weekend when there are headlines. We have instant reactions after every single piece of Ravens big news, and also during the season after games. We also have watch-alongs during the games during the season. We have the Locked On Ravens squad show twice per week, Mondays and Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Qadry Ismail. So we'll have that tonight for you at 7:30 Eastern p.m. And then we also have the Everyday Club on Locked On Ravens. It is live now, and you get a bunch of extra stuff. It's add-on content. So you get one-on-one text access with me. You get weekly Q&As, access to a Discord server, ad-free episodes, etc. So all that links, the links are in the description below, and also over on the Locked On website on the Locked On Ravens page. But all right, let's talk about Isaiah Likely now. You know, there has been a lot of conversation about Isaiah and his future in Baltimore. There was a situation that happened, and people are kind of panicking on it a little bit, at least from what I saw. So Likely, there was a post that he made. You know, he was in Boston for the Celtics game. The Celtics are playing. I don't know who the Celtics are playing, but there was a post that he made. He was at the game, and someone posted a comment that said, "Come back home, bro," with the the clovers, obviously the Celtic stuff, a green heart, and then the eye emoji. And Isaiah Likely liked that comment. And obviously you're wondering, well, what do you mean come home for Isaiah Likely? Well, he is from Cambridge, and he was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, went to high school in Massachusetts. You know, that's his home. That's where he's from. And there has been a lot of speculation about Likely's future. And again, I'm not going to chalk anything up to one liked comment on Instagram, but I wanted to use it to have the conversation about the tight end room. And actually, Q and I talked about this in the final part of the show a little bit, in that conversation we had last week that didn't air, and I'm going to air it in the final part of the show. We talked about the tight ends a little bit, but I want to kind of give my thoughts on it right now. Everybody's kind of wondering about Likely's future, right? I said that, I mentioned it, and in my opinion, just being very bluntly honest, the day Mark Andrews signed that extension with Baltimore was the day Isaiah Likely left Baltimore. Like that's just what my mindset has been. So there was a lot of panic about this liked comment on social media. It honestly got a lot more attention than I thought it would, but it got enough where I wanted to mention it and have a conversation about it here, especially as, the free agency speculation ramps up around this time. Super Bowl is over and less than a month out from free agency starting. But to me, it's just, again, the Ravens had a choice to make between Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. And when they signed Mark Andrews to that extension, to me, that was their choice because there's not really, I guess there are technically some avenues they can take. It involved Likely taking a pretty team-friendly deal, but there was never really a chance for me that they were going to re-sign both guys. So when Andrews signed that extension, to me, Isaiah Likely walked out the door. Again, it's not set in stone yet, but that's what my mindset has been. And I wonder, honestly, I've mentioned this before, I honestly wonder how much influence John Harbaugh had on that Mark Andrews extension. Would it have been different if they had waited till after the season, John Harbaugh gets fired, Jesse Minter comes in, and is there a different approach with Harbaugh out of the building? I'm curious to know how much of that was John Harbaugh, how much was Eric DeCosta, what were the decision-maker processes in that? I think it is a valid question about would it have been different if Harbaugh was not in the building versus when he was, because we know that extension happened during the season. Something I'm curious about, but I'm sure we'll never honestly know the answer to that question. But again, like you sign Andrew to that big deal, you look at the tight end contracts around the league right now, Likely to me is in line for a good amount of money, right? A good amount of money. Now, Andrews, again, just to remember his deal, it was a 3-year deal worth $39.2 or $39.3 million. So that comes out to about a little over $13 million per season. Likely, look, we can all admit it, right? He had a down year last season. He had the injury situation that I think just kind of derailed his entire season. But again, in a contract year where he had a lot of opportunity to make himself a lot of money, I don't believe that he did that. He honestly probably lost himself some money doing that. But there are still going to be teams out there that see what Likely has done over the course of his career. And again, just pulling up the stats and what he did, for example, 2 years ago when he was competing for snaps with Andrews and whatnot. Again, that's been Likely's story, right? He hasn't been able to necessarily break free because he and Andrews have been playing together in tandem really well. But Likely had 6 touchdowns in 2024. He had 5 the year prior in 2023. Again, just a weird year last year. Just 307 yards and a touchdown. It was a weird year for everybody. People had down seasons. Zay was really good. Everybody else had a down year in that department, right? So I think that a team, again, New England does make a little bit of sense, right? They have a lot of cap room. Hunter Henry is their guy at that position. He'd be an upgrade there. I've always kind of pegged some of these Ravens rivals as potential threats, which I'd be sick if it happened. A team like Cincinnati, who I think could benefit from having a player like Likely next to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in that offense and Chase Brown with Burrow. I'd be sick if that happened, but I guess it's possible. People are looking at Kansas City if Travis Kelce retires. Who knows if that actually happens? There are a couple of other teams that could potentially use his services. Like Houston, is Dalton Schultz the guy that they want there? I feel like Likely would be an upgrade in Houston. There are a lot of teams because Likely, I think, I'm sure, wants to be the number one guy. He knows he could be a number one guy and not have to share the spotlight. I don't think he hates Baltimore or anything, but I just think it's for the betterment of his career. And maybe he takes a shorter term deal elsewhere to build his value back up a little bit, maybe a 1 or 2 year deal. But if he were to do that, I don't think that's going to be in Baltimore either, because again, he'd just be an Andrews shadow. The best thing, and again, I would love Likely back. I am devastated that, my mindset is he's not coming back, because I thought the clear choice was Isaiah Likely. It's not that Andrews can't help them, but I just think that the potential with Likely, and it is he's younger, the athleticism is there. He's shown up in some big moments for them. That catch you out on 4th down against the Steelers, that was huge for them. And it just felt like And likely wasn't on this season for the Ravens, but it felt like Andrews was off for the entire year as well. And that's concerning for a guy that is 31 years old. So we'll see how that decision unfolds, but I feel like the path for Baltimore is probably re-signing Charlie Kolar with Andrews, and they've been really good at drafting tight ends in the middle rounds, right? That's how they've made their bread and butter at that position for the majority of the franchise's history. We can go back as far as you want to with that in the third, fourth, fifth, whatever you want rounds. The Ravens have found guys in that. So I wouldn't be shocked if it's Andrews, Kolar, and a mid-round pick for them this year. Likely goes off somewhere and does really well, with the full season, not getting injured in the whole 9 yards there. So again, his comment that he liked, I know it was about coming home to Boston and New England and playing for the Patriots, but even if it's not that, I don't feel like likely is long for Baltimore. I think when we're doing our initial free agent reactions after the first week, or maybe even the first couple days or day of free agency, Isaiah likely will be in a different uniform. And I'm curious to know what that contract will be. I guess, again, nothing's official till it's official. So there's a sliver of hope he could return to Baltimore in some way, shape, or form. But I don't think that's very likely right now. No pun intended there. Wow, that was kind of crazy. I'm going to miss those Isaiah likely puns too. That one was not intentional, but I have used plenty over the course of the last 4 years here on Locked On Ravens. Coming up in the final part of the show, we'll get into our conversation with Q about a Ravens checklist on certain position groups the Ravens need to address in some way, shape, or form. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the show. First, the show is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it for a limited time. You can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. A new week of shows here on Locked On Ravens as we are getting closer and closer to free agency. Again, appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. If you have a friend or a family member who's a Ravens fan or wants some daily Ravens coverage, be sure to send them over here our way on Locked On Ravens. And also you can follow me over on social media at ChaosStriker34 on Twitter, Instagram, the whole 9 yards. All right, let's get into our conversation with Q. Qadry Ismail, former Ravens receiver and Super Bowl champion. Again, we filmed an episode last week, and then right after that episode, we finished our recording. The Ravens hired Anthony Levine Sr. as their special teams coordinator, so I had to chop off that last segment to do an instant reaction segment on Anthony Levine. So that last segment I want to play here because it was a really good conversation between Q and I about some of the Ravens positional groups that they have to address this offseason. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Here, we can go through a bunch of different things when it comes to checklists and what this Ravens team needs to do. Obviously, we all know they need to improve in the trenches. It's a very big deal. But I'm going to make you choose between the side of the football. Would you prioritize, if there was one big money contract, one big move to hand out, are you spending that move on an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman? What is more important to you? We know both are important, but which one are you prioritizing?
Splash play wise, I am going with Trey Hendrickson if available and all the things. But if that was a free agency pick that takes two to tango type thing, that would make the big splash. Let me go out there and find some really strong offensive linemen, some big boys, some dogs that can do their thing and go from there. So splash wise, let's go in the trenches on that defensive front. Let's see who we can bring in that regards. And then on the other side of the ball, yeah, not that it's not important, but I'm just saying splash-wise, D-line.
Yeah, it's going to obviously depend on a lot of different things. I mean, if the Ravens go out there and sign a Trey Hendrickson, are they also going to take, Peter Woods at 14, if as a D-line guy? Like, are you going to really go all in on that and then maybe sign a Joe Bitonio, Wyatt Teller? Do you draft a guard at 14? Do you find a contributor in the second or third round that, as you've mentioned, Q has not had surgery to go play in that role? There are a lot of different avenues for them, but offensive line and defensive line in the trenches are not the only thing the Ravens do have to figure out. How do you feel about this wide receiver group right now, Q? I know you're a big Bateman guy. I'm a big Bateman guy too, but obviously last year was not great for him for multiple different reasons. Zay, obviously he looked awesome and he's really coming to his own. Potentially DeAndre Hopkins comes back. I think Tez Walker has a big role this year. Derrick Henry's doing all he can to get A.J. Brown to Baltimore. So I don't know if that's going to be a situation to monitor or not. But how much help do you think this wide receiver group needs in the offseason? How much attention do you think the Ravens need to put on that? Or do you think they're kind of fine with just bringing back D-Hop in a different offensive system with Declan Doyle and running it back?
I mean, I think it would be great to have D-Hop come in. It would be awesome to elevate Tez to higher heights. I think he would fit great in Declan Doyle's offense. And if it is you're making a splash in the receiver market and you're considering A.J. Brown, then yeah, you're going to have to let Bateman go. If you're considering trading and then trading up in, say, the draft to gain more draft strong capital to bolster your D-line or O-line, I have no problem with seeing number 7 walk out the door.
Yeah, it's going to be that, we talked about Marlon in the first part of the show. The Rashod Bateman conversation is one, Q, I'm sure we'll be having throughout the offseason in terms of like, can you upgrade there? Yet it's not anything against Bateman. It's just like, what does this team need right now? And, I know everybody's looking at the Crosby deals that have been proposed. And do you throw Bateman in a deal like that for Crosby or that, AJ Brown? Do you swap receivers? But again, I think Bateman can thrive in a Declan Doyle offense. But again, you have to do what's best for the team. And if there would be an upgrade, it's possible. Again, anything is possible at the NFL level. Is there any other position, Q, you're monitoring right now? One that is intriguing to me, I mean, we talked about the secondary a lot. They've invested so much in that secondary over the last handful of seasons where, again, you're going to have to figure out stuff with Marlon. Do you bring back Chidobe Awuzie? How do you maneuver the Gilman and Ardarius Washington situation? But look, tight end is a situation where Andrews is going to be back. We know that. Charlie Kolar is another guy that I would anticipate them re-signing. I don't think Isaiah Likely's coming back. That pains me, but that's just where I am right now. Would you go with the history that Baltimore's had at drafting tight ends in the third or fourth round and just bring in a guy? Because again, their 3 tight end sets have helped them, but again, this is a different offense. So how do you think the tight end position moving forward within Declan Doyle's offense will be as opposed to what we've seen? And do you think that they will prioritize, if one or both of Likely and Kolar walks, bringing in more guys to help out in that position? Or do you think it'll be more of like, hey, Mark is going to be the guy moving forward and they're not going to split as much up there?
Yeah, I think in Declan's offense, I mean, they do a lot of multiple tight ends. They like the 2 tight end set when it comes to, going out there and making catches and all that. They do have a 3rd tight end set that they'll have that guy be that blocker-ish type guy, and he'll get a crumb here or there. But, Pat Ricard fills that role in that regards. He can easily do it. I think for bigger picture wise, Charlie Kolar is absolutely able to, handle his own and handle a bigger workload. I mean, that's just, what it is. I think at the same time, when you look at bigger picture of draft, you don't necessarily need to go high in a draft to get another tight end. You're going to have your camp body guys, but then you're going to also have, you can have a later round tight end. I don't want this whole, the way the board fell nonsense, because you wind up messing up and you miss out on another good player. I want the quality over just quantity. And therefore, if the quality of the tight end position is not there, don't worry about it, especially if you already resigned Charlie Kolar.
He was great. You can find him over here on Locked On Ravens and, of course, Missile Training, missiletraining.com, WJZ, the whole 9 yards. But thanks so much for being here. That's all I have for you today on Locked On Ravens. We have more coming your way, obviously, with the Locked On Ravens Squad Show tonight with Q and I, along with Sam and Joku, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there. We'll have a lot of fun. And, of course, we'll be back tomorrow with our regularly scheduled programming. So be sure on the way out to hit the like and subscribe button in video form, follow along and subscribe in audio form, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.